Okay, so this is ridiculous. This is an example of how feminism can get too radical and social justice can get too extreme and hurt kids at school. This is a teacher in San Francisco who is criticizing Bernie Sanders for how he dressed in the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, saying that it was white and male privilege because he was wearing a woolly jacket and mittens. Basically, saying this is something that only a white male would do. Now, when I go through this article and I read you her quotes, and this is a link to an article directly that she wrote for the SF Chronicle, imagine that your son is in her class, okay? And this is the way that she thinks, and this is the things that she teaches her students in class. Imagine your son is in her class. How do you think his essays are being graded? How do you think his opinions are being respected? Like, do you think he's being treated the same as his female classmates? Especially if he's white. So let's take a look. So this is a link to the article, and she wrote this article herself. So this is like her direct words. I did an archive link in case it's removed or edited. I put the link to both the direct link and the archive down below. Anyway, Bernie's Mittens, a lesson for SF San Francisco high school students in subtle white privilege. And the author's name is Ingrid Seyer-Ochi. Keep in mind, this is what he was wearing. So this is what the article is about. This outfit here was the problem. And it's worth noting that even though the headline and most of the media coverage was talking about how she's talking about white privilege, this is a gendered thing because she made specific comments about maleness too. And she called out male privilege specifically in a gendered kind of way. So if you're a man of color or a boy of color in high school and your teacher is like this, or if your son is of color and he is in high school, he might have a teacher like this who thinks this way. And she makes it not just about race, but about gender. So I'm focusing on the comment she made more about gender specifically. Now, yes, if you are a white male, then it applies even more to you. But if you're a male of any race, she's talking about you too. What do we see? I asked again. We've been studying diversity and discrimination in the United States. My students were ready. What did they see? They saw a white man in a puffy jacket and huge mittens, distant not only in his social distancing, but in his demeanor and attire. Keep in mind about this. We took in the meaning of the day, the vulnerability of democracy, the power of ritual, traditions, and the peaceful transition of power. Fair enough. We talked about gender and the possible meanings of the attire chosen by Vice President Kamala Harris, Dr. Jill Biden, the Biden grandchildren, Michelle Obama, Amanda Gorman, and others. We referenced the female warriors inspiring these women, the colors of their educational degrees, and their monochromatic ensembles of pure power. See, my theory is if you see a white man wearing a jacket and gloves, that maybe represents the fact that it's wintertime and that it's cold and that he's cold, so he's dressing for the weather. And he's 79 years old, so he's somewhat older. And as people get older, they get more sensitive to the cold. So maybe he doesn't want to get pneumonia or be uncomfortable, so he's wearing a jacket and gloves because it's the wintertime and it's cold outside. Maybe it's that. Now, what is his teacher saying? That he should have taken the gloves off and take the jacket off? Like, should he have forced himself to be uncomfortable and cold? And if he was a woman, would she have written this article? Let's say you had a woman, 79 years old, same age, white, same race, show up in exactly the same outfit. Would she have written this article about a white woman wearing the same outfit? She goes on, I puzzled and fumed as an individual as I strove to be my best possible teacher. What did I see? What did I think my students should see? Seyer-Ochi wrote. A wealthy, incredibly well-educated and privileged white man showing up for perhaps the most important ritual of the decade in a puffy jacket and huge mittens. Right, like being dressed for the winter because it's cold. But to me, what's interesting is when she said, what should my students see? And in this article, she talked about how her students agree with her and her students were ready. And I'm thinking, like, if you're a student in her class, how much of your own opinion are you allowed to have? And this is why I was talking about how this kind of thinking, this kind of radical feminist, social justice, progressive thinking, can be harmful to your kids in the school system. What are these kids being taught to think? Because this was something that she did in class. Like teaching students to see this as a white male thing to do. Oh, this is what men do. This is why men are privileged and why men are bad. Because they wear coats and gloves in the wintertime? So again, imagine being a guy in that class. Like, how do you think your essays are being judged? If she judges a man negatively for wearing winter clothes in the winter, like imagine that scenario. Like, how confident are you? Like that she's gonna grade your son's essay fairly. And this is not an uncommon view. There are lots, thousands, if not millions of people who are like really deep into this rabbit hole of like radical feminist, radical social justice thinking. And it's for this. Like, this is the problem. This is what she was teaching her students about. Like, this is what she was telling her students is an example of male privilege. Because he's wearing this. It's cold. He's 79. And frankly, what difference does it make? This is not disrespectful. This is not like dressing in like a skimpy outfit or like in a t-shirt or some inappropriate logo. It's this. It looks totally normal. And it's almost like the male privilege he's pointing out is like the other way around. Because I bet you the hypocrisy with this teacher is she'd be the first person to point out how society is unfair in judging women's clothing and saying, oh, well, women are criticized for how they dress. And yet now she's criticizing a person for dressing in a completely normal way just because they happen to be male. So, like, once again, is she saying that he should not wear gloves and a coat when it's cold? So, like, women would be allowed to wear gloves and a coat, but men can't? Like, I don't even understand what the argument is. It makes absolutely no sense at all. But this is a common way of thinking now. Like, this is how kids are being trained to think. She's a high school teacher. She had this article published in the SF Chronicle, the San Francisco Chronicle, which is a pretty mainstream paper. Like, this is the way that we're heading now in society. This is the kind of thinking that's becoming prevalent. Shaming a 79-year-old man for wearing cold weather clothes in cold weather and saying that's white male privilege. Does that make any sense? Now, her last paragraph is interesting because it kind of proves my point about how, for her, it's more about gender than about race. Because she doesn't even mention race in this one. Take a look. Not so sweet? The blindness I see, so many, Bernie included, to the privileges Bernie represents. I don't know many poor or working class or female or struggling to be taken seriously folk who would show up at the inauguration of our 46th president dressed like Bernie. Unless those same folk had privilege, which they don't. Right. She doesn't know any women that would dress for cold weather when the weather is cold. Like, you know, but it's like the reason why this is serious and not just some like, stupid thing on the internet is because she's a teacher. And the SF Chronicle chose to put this article on they ran this article. And this is someone who is teaching kids right now. And this is not just like one crazy, stupid thing online from one person. This is a way that a lot of people are thinking. And in the last 5 to 10 years, this kind of like radical, progressive, leftist, feminist, social justice, whatever you want to call it, kind of thinking has been spreading. And now we are at a point where this is what teachers are teaching their students. It's not just that she wrote this article. It's that this is what she's teaching in class to kids. Like, this is what they're learning. And imagine the pressure, like if you're in that classroom and you see all the kids around you like nodding, you feel like you can't say anything. Like, you have to go along with it. I mean, imagine like psychologically what that experience does. Like, how does that affect like their college careers and their working careers in the future? So, anyway, I linked it down below if you want to read it. I think it's crazy, but that's just me.